People come to AGT to chase fame. But Miguel and Lee didn't come to chase anything. They came because of a promise made in a hospital room, to someone they can never see again. And tonight, when they stepped on that stage, holding one microphone together, nobody knew the world was about to stop. Nobody knew that a song written in a small fishing village in the Philippines was about to make millions cry, including Simon Cowell. Long before the world knew their names, Miguel lived in a tiny fishing village in the Philippines, a place where life was beautiful, but surviving wasn't easy. The mornings began with the smell of the sea, and the struggle to earn enough for the day. Most kids dreamed of toys, new clothes, or birthday parties. Miguel only dreamed of seeing his mother rest without worrying. She worked at the market from sunrise to sunset, selling fish, then vegetables, then anything she could find, just to make sure Miguel never slept hungry. Despite her exhaustion, she always found a way to smile, even when her hands trembled from carrying too much weight. Music was her escape. Every night, when the world went quiet, she would sit beside Miguel, hold his tiny hands, and hum a gentle tune. Miguel didn't understand poverty back then. He only understood love. As he grew older, he discovered he had something rare, a voice that could calm storms. Neighbors would stop in the street just to listen to him sing while helping his mother with her chores. For a while, it seemed like life was finally becoming kinder. But reality didn't care about dreams, it cared about survival. One rainy evening, Miguel found his mother sitting outside their small home, breathing heavily, her face pale. She tried to hide her pain, but Miguel could see it. Hospitals were too expensive, so she pushed through the illness for months until she could no longer stand. Miguel sat by her bedside every day, singing songs just as she once did for him. Her voice cracked the night she finally spoke about the future. Miguel, Anak, your gift is not for applause, she whispered. It's for people, for hearts that need healing. Tears filled Miguel's eyes. Mama, I'll sing for you. I'll sing anywhere you want. I'll make money and take you to the best doctors. You'll get better. But she shook her head softly. She knew time was slipping. Promise me something, she said, gripping his hand with the last of her strength. Sing with kindness, not for fame. Use your music to make people feel loved. Miguel didn't want to accept it, but he nodded, because it was all he could give her. I promise. Mama, I promise. She passed away 2 days later, and life changed forever. After her funeral, people from all over the village came to comfort him. Many said they remembered the first time Miguel sang, and how it made their worries disappear for a moment. Some even shared how his mother helped them silently with food or money when they were struggling. That night, Miguel understood something clearly for the first time. His mother was never rich, but she gave everyone richness of heart. He wanted to continue that legacy. Not through money, but through music. Years later, when he met Lee, a girl who also sang not to impress people but to comfort them, it felt like destiny. She had loss in her story too, and when their voices blended for the first time, it felt like two broken hearts learning how to heal together. And deep inside, Miguel, the promise remained unbroken. One day, the world would understand it too, not through trophies, not through fame, but through kindness in every note. Years passed, and Miguel and Lee built a life around music, not in stadiums or expensive lounges, but in places where music mattered most. They sang in children's hospitals to distract little hearts from pain. They sang in orphanages for kids who grew up without lullabies. They performed on the streets after typhoons, raising donations for families who lost everything. They didn't have money, sponsors, or a fancy studio, but they had impact. People online slowly began sharing videos of their performances, calling them voices that hugged the soul. But viral fame never came, and that didn't disappoint them. Because they weren't singing to be discovered, they were singing to heal. Then, one afternoon, while resting after a charity event, Lee showed Miguel something on her phone, an audition announcement for AGT 2025 in Los Angeles. Millions of people watch this show. She said softly, maybe the world needs to hear your mother's song. Miguel froze. His heart raced. AT wasn't meant for people like them, to singers with no production team. no financial backing, no confidence in their appearance compared to global stars, and even if they somehow made it to America, how would they pay for tickets, hotels, food? We didn't make that promise to get famous, Miguel insisted. It was never about this. Lee didn't argue, she just held his hand. I know. But your mother's message, the world needs kindness right now. Maybe music isn't meant to stay small. Her words lingered in Miguel's mind for weeks. He prayed, cried, and replayed his mother's voice over and over. Finally, one night, he whispered to the moonlit sky, "If this is your plan, open a door." And somehow, the door opened an international foundation that followed their charity. Singing reached out and offered to sponsor their travel. If they promised to sing for shelters and retirement homes in the US during their stay, it wasn't luxury, it was purpose. It was exactly what Miguel's mother would have wanted. The flight to Los Angeles was the first plane ride of their lives. They clutched each other's hands during takeoff, terrified but hopeful. When they landed, the city seemed enormous. Tall buildings, bright lights, and faces from every corner of the world. They were nobodies in a place full of stars, yet somehow, they felt meant to be there. On audition day, they stood backstage watching one performer after another take the stage with fireworks, dance crews, LED backdrops, and dramatic entrances. Lee swallowed hard. Miguel closed his eyes. Their act was simple: 2 mics, 1 guitar, and a song written in a fishing village. When their names were called, Miguel's palms turned cold. The camera zoomed in, the audience went quiet, and Simon Cowell raised his eyebrows with an expression that said, "You'd better be good." Lee whispered, "Whatever happens today, your mother will hear you." Miguel nodded, and stepped into the spotlight, not to win, not to prove anything, but to honor the promise that shaped his life. The risk wasn't losing the show. The risk was whether the world would understand the message they carried. Because tonight, everything was on the line. The lights dimmed. The hum of the audience softened to a whisper. Miguel and Lee stood side by side, their hands almost brushing, hearts pounding in perfect unison. They had performed for crowds before, but nothing had felt like this. This was the world watching. Millions of strangers, including the toughest critics, would hear their story tonight. Lee strummed the guitar, her fingers trembling slightly, but Miguel felt her strength through the vibration. He inhaled, letting the memories of his mother flood him, the quiet nights in the fishing village, the lullabies, her last words about singing with kindness. He raised his eyes to the audience and saw their anticipation, their skepticism, the subtle scoffs of some who thought, 2 small singers, nothing special. Then Miguel began to sing. At first it was soft, fragile, almost like a whisper. But in that fragile whisper was everything he had ever felt: grief, love, loss, hope. Lee's harmonies joined in, gentle yet profound, wrapping around the melody like a warm embrace. Every note seemed to stretch beyond the walls of the theater, brushing against hearts with invisible hands. Something extraordinary happened. The room went still. Not the silence of boredom, but the silence of connection. Phones were lowered. Eyes glistened. Breath caught in throats. For the first time that day, the audience stopped being spectators. They were witnesses. Witnesses to a story that transcended language, nationality, and fame. Miguel's voice cracked at one line, and in that crack, Simon Cowell saw every boy he had ever been. Every son he had lost, every mother's whisper that went unheard. He shifted in his seat, trying to remain neutral, but the tears were unstoppable. One slowly slid down his cheek, catching the stage lights like a falling star. The song didn't shout for attention. It didn't use theatrics or gimmicks. It healed. It reminded everyone that life could be unbearably hard and heartbreakingly beautiful at the same time. Strangers clutched each other's hands. Some wiped away tears for the first time in years. Some whispered the name of someone they had lost, feeling that the performers understood grief they had never voiced. Backstage, the cameramen and producers were in awe. Miguel and Lee didn't see the cameras, they only saw each other, and the invisible threads of emotion connecting them to every soul in the room. In that moment, They weren't just performers. They were vessels for a message the world desperately needed: kindness, love, and the courage to keep giving, even when the world feels indifferent. By the last note, there wasn't a single dry eye in the audience. Not because the song was sad, but because it was honest. Because it was real. Because it reminded people of what mattered most. The final chord lingered in the air like a heartbeat, then faded into a silence so complete it felt sacred. Simon Cowell pressed the golden buzzer without a word, his hand trembling, his face wet with tears. The camera zoomed in, capturing a man renowned for his stoicism. Undone by two voices from a small fishing village halfway across the world. Miguel and Lee looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces, not believing this was real. But deep inside, they knew. Their mother's promise had reached the world, and for the first time, they realized the magnitude of what kindness, carried through music, could do. The world had gone quiet, and in that silence, everything had changed. When the last note faded, a silence fell over the theater, not the polite pause before applause, but a deep, almost reverent stillness. For a moment, it seemed like the world itself had stopped breathing, as if holding on to the echo of their voices. Miguel and Lee stood on stage, trembling, tears streaking their faces, still holding hands as if their grip could anchor them to reality. The performance wasn't about fame, or winning, or applause. It was about the message they had carried for years, and the message had landed. People in the audience slowly began to rise to their feet. Some had tears rolling down their cheeks. Others were whispering to the strangers beside them, sharing fragments of their own memories, their own grief, and their own moments of love lost and love remembered. But Miguel and Lee barely noticed. Their eyes were fixed on each other, and in that gaze was an unspoken understanding. They had done what they came to do. Simon Cowell's reaction was unmistakable. He was still seated, tears pooling in his eyes, his hand shaking as he reached for the golden buzzer. His voice trembled when he spoke, cracking through his usual stoic demeanor. "Thank you," he said, barely above a whisper. The world needed this today. For Miguel and Lee, those words were more than praise. They were validation of every hardship, every sleepless night, every performance in empty streets and hospital corridors. Every note had carried the love, pain, and hope they had felt in their hearts. And tonight, that love had reached farther than they ever imagined. As they walked backstage, they were greeted by staff, crew, and even fellow contestants, all offering hugs, congratulations, and awestruck comments. Yet, Miguel felt a strange emptiness in the midst of all the praise. It wasn't for applause that they had performed, was for the souls who needed healing. And in that emptiness, he realized something profound. The true impact of their song would not be measured by ratings, medals, or viral views. It would be measured in quiet moments like the hearts that would heal, the hands that would hold each other a little tighter. The smiles returned to faces long forgotten. Lee squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. "They understand. They feel it." Miguel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "It's bigger than us. Bigger than the stage. Bigger than Simon. This is why we sing." The cameras continued rolling, capturing the raw, unfiltered moment of two small voices shaking the world with a message that was never spoken aloud. Everyone understood. And for Miguel and Lee, it was a revelation. Sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness, the truest gifts of the heart, are the ones you cannot see, only feel. That night, when the episode aired, viewers worldwide were moved to tears. Messages poured in from strangers across continents, sharing stories of love, loss, and hope reignited. Hospitals played the recording for patients. Schools used it as a lesson in compassion. Even people who had never watched talent shows were suddenly reminded of the power of human connection. Miguel realized something else too. The promise to his mother had transcended time and distance. She wasn't there to see the ovation, but her message had traveled across oceans, finding its way into the hearts of millions. Standing in the quiet of the backstage area, Miguel whispered, "Mama, we did it." Your voice, Your love. It's everywhere now. Lee nodded, tears falling silently. The world needed to hear it, and they did. They really did. And in that moment, they understood. True kindness, once shared, cannot be contained. It multiplies, it heals, and sometimes, it can even change the world. The following morning, Miguel and Lee woke to a world that already felt different. Their performance had gone viral overnight, and the reactions were pouring in from every corner of the globe. Videos, messages, and comments flooded their phones, strangers sharing how a single song had touched their hearts, healed old wounds, and reminded them of what truly mattered. Hospitals were playing their performance in wards. Schools were using it to teach compassion. Even news channels were broadcasting the story of the Filipino duo who had made Simon Cowell cry. Miguel scrolled through a message from a woman in New York who said the song had brought her mother out of depression. Another, from a soldier stationed overseas, shared how the melody had reminded him of home. Somewhere in a small village in Africa, a teacher told them that their voices had inspired students to help neighbors in need. The weight of it all was overwhelming. This was bigger than fame, bigger than applause. It was love reaching across oceans, cultures, and languages. Backstage at AGT, Miguel and Lee hugged tightly, letting the gravity of the moment settle in. "We didn't come here for this," Miguel said, his voice barely audible over the hum of notifications. "We came to honor Mama, and now? It feels like she's smiling everywhere." Lee nodded, her eyes shimmering with tears. She always said, music can heal hearts. She never imagined it could heal the whole world. The duo received invitations to perform in charity events, awareness campaigns, and international festivals, but for them, every performance had to carry the same message: kindness, compassion, and love. They were no longer just singers. They had become messengers of hope. Proof that a single act of generosity, of pouring one's heart into something selfless, can ripple far beyond imagination. As the days passed, Miguel began to understand the true depth of their promise. Their mother had taught him that music was not meant to be a vehicle for personal gain, but a gift to others. And now, seeing the impact of that philosophy, Miguel realized she had been right. Every note they sang, every harmony they offered, was a form of kindness that multiplied when shared. The world didn't just watch the performance, they felt it. People cried in joy, in relief, in remembrance. People shared the song with loved ones, hugged strangers, and reconnected with memories long buried. A simple song, born in a small fishing village, had reminded millions of the human capacity for love, compassion, and empathy. Standing on a quiet balcony later that evening, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline, Miguel turned to Lee and whispered, "We didn't win a trophy, but we fulfilled a promise bigger than anything we could have imagined." Lee smiled softly. "And somewhere, Mama is singing with us." The lesson was clear. True acts of kindness are never small. They can cross oceans, transform lives, and touch hearts in ways we may never fully understand. Miguel and Lee's song had done more than move Simon Cowell to tears. It had reminded the world of the beauty that lies in selfless love, in courage, and in the bravery to share one's heart, no matter how humble the beginning. And in that shared moment, Miguel, Lee, and millions of viewers around the world understood a simple truth: love, kindness, and hope, when carried with sincerity, can truly shake the world.